techniques are so sophisticated that almost any one of us could be captured by the approach of various cults.
Am I gonna have to punch strangers?
No.
Flotation tanks? Electronic headbands?
The path's not about gimmicks. It's about love.
Well, I love love.
So do we.
I'm April now.
April?
It's my new name. This is my new friend, Flora. And this is my new life.
Do you think we could go out, grab some coffee, talk?
I don't pollute my system with caffeine anymore.
Okay, then. How about a walk? It's not our time to walk. Perhaps you'd like to show your friend the path.
Please, let me show you the path.
Your parents are really worried about you.
This center is where we pray, not for material possessions, but to find true relationships.
Christy, I read the letter.
My name is April.
April, your parents think that you've disowned them.
Our leaders' teachings say that the parent-child bond is the root to all evil, that we must learn to break contact. This is our dining hall.
Christy,
we have only...
your parents love you.
Her name is April.
Doris and Hal are like bees pollinating a plastic flower. They have no concept of life's true richness. Here, we are creating better people. You must come for a retreat, Eileen. It's perfect.
Christy, come home with me right now.
My name is April. How many times do I have to tell you that?
Christy, please! Christy!
Can't you see she's happier with us? I'll show you out. Don't contact her again.
Once again, thank you so very much for joining us here on our special Spiritwatch Ministries stream, which we turn into a podcast. And this is a special edition of that. We're going to be really trying to tackle a long-standing question that we've been asked for many months now, since our traffic and people who've come by our way to visit with us has really increased. One big question that comes to stand out as we look into the spiritual topography of the day, where deceptive movements like cults, poor word, but it's what people use, where all these movements mean to take people. And one of the big concerns is people ask many times, well, how do people get recruited to them? How do they get sucked into them? How do they become a part? And typically, there's all kinds of debate about that. And then one of the extreme views is that, people come up and say, well, I wouldn't be so stupid as to join a cult. I wouldn't be so ignorant. I wouldn't be such a sheeple type person to get involved. But those perspectives, I think, by and large, we need to address those. But I think most people just really would like to know why. How do people get involved in movements that are known as cults? And every one of you, I really do once again want to thank you for being here. And every one of you are all former members of such movements. And let me go on the record to say I don't think any of you are stupid or dumb or brainless. I think you're all very sharp people. And I'd like to, being with Scott, go around and you can just introduce yourselves and maybe say a word about where you came from and maybe just a quick opening thought on your own about how you feel about that question.
Sure, my name is Scott. I was part of the Gladstone community. 2012 to about 2015.
Okay. Could you repeat that again, Scott? It kind of broke up there. Sorry.
Sure. Scott, and I was part of the Gladstone community from about 2012 to 2015. I had I was a white collar professional. I was working in pharmacy software development, so I was a pretty smart guy. I still am.
Yeah.
So I would like to, abolish that stereotype that we took somebody who's brainless or can't think for themselves. It was just the time. I'll just give that. Would you like me to go into that, or did you want to just introduce everybody else first?
Yeah, let's introduce everyone because, like I said, I think we all can dovetail it together. I think we all can certainly, each of one of our individual paths are going to resonate. To be honest, be on the up and up, I was never in a cult, although my mother was, and that was an interesting story. That really opened my eyes. But in any case, Julie, if you can start next, I'd appreciate you sharing a little on that too. Julie? Oh, are you muted? Yeah, okay.
Yes. My name is Julie McLaughlin, and I was a former member of Zenos Christian Fellowship, which is also known as the Fish House, which is also known as Dwell Community Church. They like to change their name every decade or so. Reputation issues. When I joined that organization, it was 1982, and I was there for 11 years. During that time, I was just a young child, and I was 17, but I was easy pickings in that my family was chaotic, had some church involvement, but was no longer attending church. And they set out an all-out offensive to hit the kids in my high school. And I was caught up in that sweep of people that they got from the high school where I lived. And many of the people that I knew then and love are still there. And I would really love to see the opportunity just to have conversation about, there is such a thing as Christianity without being in a high controlling group. But of course, those conversations are never allowed with current members.
Right.
So
right.
That's my intro.
Okay. So you got basically recruited when you were younger, at a much younger age, whereas Scott was just looking for an alternative to where he was at. So Adam, where were you at? This sounds almost pretty close to where you were as well, but you can elucidate on that.
Well, actually, I think it's kind of a somewhat sort of splitting the difference there between Julie and Scott. I was in my late 20s. My wife at the time was doing the Way Down workshop, and we were recruited into the spin-off church of the Way Down workshop, the Remnant Fellowship. What's interesting about my story is that I actually, throughout the recruitment process, was worried that we might be being indoctrinated into a cult. I was worried it was a cult, and I asked a lot of questions that, ultimately we didn't get to join because I'd asked so many questions of the cult leader that we were kicked out the day we tried to join. But it's interesting because even with some knowledge of cults, having been aware of cults growing up, and like my parents used to work with ex-cult members, like I still got sucked in. And what got me was my idealism, my Christian idealism, the idea that both really, really wanting to see Christianity unfold the way that I thought it should unfold in the world, and feeling like the cult sold that vision, but then in addition, feeling special, like being given the message that like the mission was critical to me joining, and if I didn't, like I was sorely needed to help move that mission forward. Which, sometimes I think when you're young, you're looking for that sense of specialness and importance. So for me, that was my story.
All right. Carla, and we appreciate once again you're coming on as well. I know you just had a long, busy day yourself. And your 4-year-old walks in. It's cool by me. I'm
my feet too.
Yeah. So, where did you come from? Where did you start this whole journey on? And
so, I was a part of the cult called Sound Doctrine, out of Seattle area, Washington State, but it had moved around from starting in Missouri and Colorado, ended up in Washington State. I was actually in Texas and was a part of a very loving, non-denominational church out of Kennedale, Texas. And through wanting more than I felt like I was getting from my normal fellowship within the church, a group of us decided to start meeting for prayer, meeting for Bible study outside of our church together. And we were just being very, I would say, I don't know, people use this term, but fed by the outside teachings we were finding on the internet. And the leader of our group, which happened to be the deacon of the church that we did all attend at the time, found the teachings of Tim Williams on the internet. Again, we were mixing, it was gleaning from a whole bunch of different teachers. But Sound Doctrine seemed to get a hold of our leaders at the time of our little group. And through the teachings, and actually interesting, a lot of reverse psychology was used on all of us, was basically, we don't know if we want you to join kind of tactics, and we don't know if you're basically good enough to be a part of our group. They didn't use those words because of course that would be all the telltale signs to keep somebody from joining. But we saw in them people that were really trying to live out the Bible as we thought or had in our minds that it should be lived. And we weren't really seeing it where we were, so we were wanting to do it. So why not fellowship with people that did? And that was the hook. There's a lot more to it, but that's about as basic as you get at the moment.
Right.
And our family up to Washington State.
So cultism isn't just this like ordinary problem just stuck in one particular part of the U.S. It crosses borders everywhere, and everywhere you go, you're going to see that kind of malign influence everywhere. And every one of you have told a story in which you were searching, you were looking for something more, you were looking to beyond believe in something bigger than yourselves. And you were beckoned to, you were reached out to. So those sound like pretty common reasons for why people get involved in cults, don't they? I mean, it isn't like you go out there, like I said, to become a Mansonite or somebody like that who goes out and kills on the order of a cult leader who wants blood everywhere in his own little apocalypse. you wanted to change the world. Every one of you wanted to do more. You wanted to progress. You wanted to get better, and you wanted to just basically, rise above where you were. And so that seems to be like a very common thread of people. What the motive is, the why people would even think about that. And can any of you speak briefly to what it was you were leaving behind, what you felt like you just couldn't deal with anymore, that made this revelation so special to you?
I can maybe speak to that. The scripture that really was taught to us or put out as a fishing line was, pick up your cross, follow Jesus. And the disciples got up right then. They got up right then and they left everything behind. And so that was one of the things. So all the other people around you, are they getting up and leaving all they have behind? And so it was, again, a draw to, well, why not? Why aren't you being like these scripture samples that we're supposed to follow? And why aren't the other people you're around saying they're Christians doing the same? And so there begins to be this buildup of Christian versus Christian, instead of really focusing on where you're at. One thing that I think cults like to do is they say, come to our team, and instead of, why not grow where you are? And that is something I believe that the churches aren't preparing people for. I know I wasn't prepared for. And I think almost that time and experience teaches you those things. But I do believe it's something that the church doesn't really address so much, is they kind of play into it. The we versus them, denomination versus denomination. And so when you start doing that with scripture on just the basic level of becoming a disciple and following Jesus, you can do the same thing. And you can start pulling people away from everything they know, in hopes that they are joining the right team, or the better team, or the one that's going to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
I like Carlos about that. When you talked about this podcast, Raphael, one question that sort of stuck in my mind was, because I noticed that we're all people who were recruited. We were all recruited into movements away from Christianity and into cultic movements. What about mainstream American church life sets people up for this? That there are some factors, I think, that operate inside of church life, some givens, some assumptions that sort of sometimes can make somebody vulnerable. I'm thinking about what you shared, Carla, and in my case, it's pretty similar. That sense of feeling like there's this sort of ideal view of what it means to be a Christian, and then you're sort of searching for that in the church that you're in. And rather than recognizing this is the growth process that you grow through grace to achieve, and you don't achieve it. I mean, you're always growing and you're always needing that grace. But, and the wisdom is realizing that nobody really ever arrives. You're still growing. But you get sold this idea that, well, here's this group of people who figured it out and they've arrived.
Right. That's exactly it.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think the other piece too is this sense that that anybody, this sort of very democratic sense that anybody with a good head on their shoulders in the Bible can be the leader. And I'm not knocking lay ministry or anything like that, but how many of these cultic leaders come up with very little Bible training? Mm-hmm. They have the dark personality of control, and they have a Bible. and they really navigate the cultural lens of the church really well, and they kind of know how to pick people off of the fly.
Right.
Well, I think, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think for me, initially, what attracted me to the organization was that I needed parents. I was graduating high school and I knew I was going to move out and I needed parents. And the church that I became involved with, or the organization I became involved with, has a setup where their goal is to get people involved in the real estate endeavors of church members. They have what are called ministry houses. So if you're single, you move into these ministry houses, and that is like a different level of control. So you submit yourself not only to the authority of the church at large, but the authority of the leader of your ministry house. And there are very specific rules. And I think that there was a lot of comfort in those rules initially. But over time, the noose kept getting pulled tighter and tighter and tighter. The selling point that kept the young folks like me at the time was the whole concept that we were the one true church. Like we were doing it like first century church people.
Everyone smiles at that point, Julia.
Yeah, we're the one true church. And the one true church, if you leave it, then you're dead to us. And it's not stated, but you can notice it immediately. If somebody gets away, it's always there's something wrong with them. And the only way that you can continue to be okay is to stay with us.
Right.
So I think initially it was the comfort of the rules, but as things went on, that just wasn't. I went there. My very first meeting was because a Catholic friend of mine said, I found the one true church. And I was like, what's the Pope got to say about that? Like, I don't know, and it was meeting in this basement of this house with all of these really handsome dudes that look like Tiger Beat magazine. I know you're all much too young to understand where I did notice you were all wearing glasses at one point.
Yeah.
So maybe you understand Tiger Beat magazine, but they all just look like beautiful beach boys that lived there. And of course it was like locked with high school girls. But I think too that, that was also like the dangerous situation where once again, the bait and the switch. Here's the bait, these beautiful young guys that are eating ramen noodles and saying, hey, wow. And, wearing cool clothes and no shoes. And then it goes on from that to, oh, and by the way, you can't wear that shirt. You can't look this way. You can't do this. You can't do that. To the point, as an adult, nearly 30 years old, I was letting someone else tell me I had to be home by midnight.
Yeah.
And I'm not a dumb, unintelligent, easily managed person, but somehow I let myself submit to that because I want to be involved in the one true church.
Right. Yeah, because part of that recruitment process, part of that vetting that the group had, was to see if you would shoehorn those rules into your own footsteps, and to see how they and they try to get you to try them on and see how you went, and that's how it works. They're going to give you that little bit of room to test you, and of course, if this really means everything to you, well, sure, you don't mind getting home before midnight. You don't mind listening to somebody verbally pistol whip somebody else because they deserved it, right? So those are the kind of things that you start slipping on. You start letting go. And I was wondering if Scott, if you had anything to say about that, but like I said, I didn't want to cut. I think you started to say something, but didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah, for me, it was like I was in my late 30s when I got in, and I was in Florida at the time, and I moved back to Florida with the understanding that I was going to get back into a relationship that I had been in before. And when I got back, that person was already dating somebody else. And I was left, like, all of my friends that I had there were, they took sides, and I was left alone. And I was at the gym, and there were these two guys that just kept talking to me every day, and were impressed with the weight I could lift. And it was the sense of family that I did not have, that I needed at that time, because I was so vulnerable. And I had been away from God for a while. And when they invited me to their Bible study, I'm like, well, I pretty much suck at living my own life. Maybe I should give this God thing a shot again. And they basically, I know the word love bombing. We hear it a lot, and that was what they did. Like, they knew I was somebody who was vulnerable, who had hard heart. And I can piggyback on what everyone else has said. I pretty much felt like there was a superiority complex, like the one true church. We were the ones that were truly following Jesus, and everybody else was just, flying by the seat of their pants. I can say, if there is one thing the American church is missing, is that I didn't feel that love from congregations I had been before. And it doesn't need to match that, but there's this lack of, we'll see you on Sunday morning or some Saturday night, and that's great. And then there's no no follow through on forming like deep relationships of discussion that you can have. And it's just basically checking a box to go to church. And because I couldn't find that in the churches, I found it there, just at the right time.
Yep. So each of you found the beckoning of community. There was a community that engaged you at not one but several different levels. It spoke to each and every one of your needs in some way. So to me, that's not a dastardly thing. That's just human need, human nature. We all want to be a part of it. I know I do. I mean, that's why I'm involved with my own home church and the friendship circles I do have. I need that. I'm a social creature, and I need the affirmation of others. But in a movements like you've been in, though, would you be willing to offer the opinion that maybe it's heightened a little more? Maybe they've ratcheted up and been a little more intentional? Because that's what I mean. I'm not in any way, shape, or form disagreeing that the modern church is really out to lunch on this very point. But at the same time, it's in what I've watched people do and get involved with. It seems that the communal aspects of the individual movements you've all been involved with really work hard to really draw you in and make you more involved and getting you to invest that emotional and spiritual equity in there that you're going to want to pay back from. So what were some of the things that they did to really hook you? I guess what I want to say is, what were some of the things that really stood out to you that you remember they did that really drew you down that path?
I remember, just going to they'd invite me over on a Friday night to watch movies. And if it's too late, you're right. And they would take time to sit and listen to me. They would invite me out to dinner, and every time I showed up, there was always people engaged, because I didn't just jump in with both feet. There was a lull time between April and July before I actually moved into one of the houses. There was that buildup, of just this. I just felt like a love that I've never felt before,
right?
And a brotherhood I've never felt before, and a family that I've never felt before. And I grew up in a Pentecostal church. Sometimes I call it Pentecostal Raphael, but no offense. But
it's okay. We grew up in the same church, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I grew up in the church, and I didn't feel that in the church.
Yeah.
That and I was a pastor's kid, and I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In many ways, it's worse for them. It really is, and it's scandalous. It should be.
I'd like to kind of weigh in on this as well, the communal aspect. Absolutely think that that's used in the cults. One of the tactics that sound doctrine would use would be they wouldn't tell you to stop talking to your family, but they would make it such an issue. Basically, if you didn't love your family in the Lord, meaning how God loved his disciples and loved the people, which means, again, leaving everything behind or holding them accountable to the word of God and things like that. Basically, they would force a separation. So you would force, instead of naturally, as we all know that in your life, that when you do follow the Lord, there's some people that don't want anything to do with you anymore, and then some do, and some are indifferent either way. Sound doctrine specifically would force the confrontation, and so then lines were drawn pretty quickly on basically on who your family really was. So for example, if someone died and they were not of God, why would you spend time on people that were already choosing hell, for example? Why would you spend time on people that have made a choice? So they drew that family to them. So for example, the cult leader was calling himself grandpappy to the children. Mom and dad was being used as their names. So the family was being reset up within the church. The cult that I was a part of. Yeah. And it almost had to be that way because, as we all know, each one of us had our own families, not only within our own homes, but outside of homes. So as the strong man, I've shared that scripture with you, Raphael, but to take down a home, you got to bind the strong man. So you got to replace one family with another.
Yeah, right. And and they use all of the things that any social convention would use, like, getting email addresses, exchanging phone numbers, visiting each other's TikTok accounts, whatever it is they can do to get that hook into your daily life, which everybody does, and to use that as a means to draw you deeper in is what they do so well. And that's one of the things, Adam, that blew me away about Remnant Fellowship, about how intentional they were in doing that very thing, how they drew people into Remnant by making sure they got all their personal information and make sure they got the phone calls, they got the follow up, and that's something that contributed to the unbelievable things that we heard about later. They were able to successfully, after we first met Adam, they were able to successfully draw a bunch of teenage kids into becoming spies and watching outside of church that we both were meeting at. Sure. And videotaping it, and Gwen Chamberlain asking them, okay, who's that going in? And then watch the faces of these kids fall when they realized it was their parents. They had to, at that point, make a choice. Who was the father? Who was the mother? That's what got me in at him, and that what convinced me right there in that sort of thing.
I like Raphael. I forgot about that little event. That's true. I want to comment on something that Will Scott and Carla had said. I was thinking about the forced confrontation. Like that quick drawing of lines, like who's in and who's out. Like you're in this movement and your family is out. So you have a few chances to kind of like try to bring them to the light, but if not, otherwise you kind of need to like cut them off, or if not cut them off, like, you're not going to give them access to your mind or heart anymore because they're an evil influence. And it's so common And I just saw that happening in Remnant for sure. But it's kind of funny. I want to go back to something Scott said, like, like about churches, like not doing the best job of like fostering unique and deep relationships outside of the worship setting. And it's funny because that's one of the reasons why I wondered if we were being indoctrinated into a cult is we actually attended a church that didn't do a half bad job at that. Like they had a small group ministry. There was some pretty active men's ministry and stuff. And I knew what it felt like when that was real with all its like warts and stuff, like where like, that event could have been better, but like their heart's in the right place. And like, I came to really love that authenticity. And when we were being love bombed and, like sought after by Remnant, it was like 100% pure. It was like focused. It was creepy. Because like we started comparing notes because a group of us were being indoctrinated at the same time. And we were like, oh, so-and-so called me today. Oh, she called me. Oh, she called me. And we realized like they had made the rounds. Like everybody had been called and they had gotten our different versions of stories of like what was going. And like, that's like where I was like, something's weird. Nobody hits every base like that. It was clearly like controlled and precise. And it was, it was like a little telling.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that's the hallmark. It's the how really intentional they get, how precise. I mean, it's like love bombing. You think of like love bombing being the term being that we use is for the insincere and rather contrived ways in which people shower you with insincere affection, who want to kind of draw you into a deep affiliation with their group or their cause or relationship with them. And that's something that when you think of the word love bomb, you think of like carpet bombing. You think of the B-52s over Vietnam in the 1960s, dropping tons and tons of munitions everywhere, just smashing everything and not necessarily hitting a target. But love bombing is a whole lot more sophisticated than that, as we're hearing. It is literally a smart bomb. And Julie, you mentioned, you and Scott mentioned, the fact that there were these houses that became centers where this took place. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's something else you can talk about that, but what are thoughts you have about that side of recruitment? You hear me, Julie?
Well, something that
let's make sure. Sorry.
It's something that that Zenos Dwell learned a long time ago is that their love bombing methodology, although very sophisticated, doesn't work as well once somebody is 30 or 40. So they definitely focus on trying to reach younger people, less formed humans. And it's been their only key to success because they have a front door that's wide open, but their back door somehow is even wider. Like they'll bring people in, and if you're not the right fit for them, if you're too many problems, or if you're not committed enough, then they'll love bomb you in reverse. They'll just let you die on the vine, trying to get affirmation, attention, whatever. And they'll confront you, and they'll tell you like you can't attend a certain meeting, retreat, event as punishment for not reaching out, or as punishment for staying out too late, or just not being a good bro this week and hanging out with enough people, because you do have to report how many people you talk to each week and what you said to them. There are actual worksheets that I was there back before personal computers were in everybody's pocket. But now they do it in in an Excel worksheet that they have to all turn in. Mm-hmm. So if they don't get enough love touches with people, then they can be prohibited from attending an event or retreat or something fun. Yeah. And for some reason that just doesn't work with your average 40-year-old. So those folks leave.
Yeah.
But the exception being, and just, I don't have any like proof or anything. I haven't done a great deal of study, but I look at the people who are still in leadership and that have persisted there a really long time. Many of them were brought in as teens themselves, and they're the only ones that have been able to stick. The rest of people, they outgrow the oppression. Not everybody and not all at once, but it does happen. And that's how even in our little locale over 50 years, we have a Facebook group of over 500 people that want to connect because of the pain they've experienced there.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, because that's just a drop in the bucket. But the fact that 500 humans in Central Ohio say, I don't follow Jesus anymore because of these guys, or I think God is just a ripoff.
Right.
And everybody's just like them.
Right. Right. And it appealed to such high ideals. I mean, it used the most highest aspirations of the human spirit. People wanting to do better, people wanting to live better, and the recruitment just got more and more intense, simply because they felt it was for their own good, even when they had to cut off people who they felt weren't actually useful, if I can use the word. So when that love bombing got to the point where you made a decision, what were some of the other things that maybe each of you can talk about this? What was, when it got to that point where you made the decision to get more involved? How long did the love bombing stay in place? How long were you continually made to feel more special, better, you were really just this wonderful person? I mean, you can only hold insincere affection up so long, before the other shoe drops. How long was the honeymoon period lasting? How long did it take place in your life? And when did you start to realize that there's some consequences to that?
My love bombing kind of quit not long after we moved up to the group, but that was one of their tactics. I almost wonder if Tim Williams studied all these other groups and said, I got to do something different so people can't call me a cult, because he almost did a lot of the reverse of some of the tactics being used. So his love bombing was a lot different. He actually came in with bombs and said it was the love of the Lord. So when you look at the Old Testament a lot, you see God, in some pretty harsh ways. But when you ask yourself, well, is God love? Well, yes, he is. Well, why is he acting so harshly? Well, he loves you. So that was his tactic. So I actually kind of got bombed right away, but was brainwashed to believe that that was being loved. So a little bit different. I thought I'd just throw that in there, that it's always the nice that is presented as love.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to tell you one very painful thing that was done, but I was put in the corner like a little child, and was also threatened with disfellowship right away over not submitting to my husband and not disciplining my children. Those are, and those are vague examples. I can get down to some specific things, but to supposedly love me and teach me to do the ways of Jesus, so kind of strange, but that is a little maybe different than the love bombing that others got.
I noticed when talking about how the honeymoon was over really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I do see that the technique of employing prescribing the paradox, which is where if you want someone to do something, you prescribe something completely asinine.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes with people that they feel like they can't quite control, the way that they get them further hooked in is to say, you can't do anything until you complete the following things, but you're probably not leadership material.
Right.
And then all that does to people that are wanting love and approval and acceptance and belonging, community, all the stuff that all of us humans want. What kicks in is that sense of, I need to do this, or all of this is going to be withdrawn.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
I wanted to,
And that's where, another, and now even the people that are kind of bucking the system begin to engage and cooperate.
Mhm.
I wanted to make one connection, I think, to what you guys are sharing about sort of the love bombing and then the withdrawal of the love bombing or the use of punishment. Because it reminds me of I used to actually work with members from a different cult group, and I had an individual who shared this story of during his recruitment process, how, and I think it's probably fairly similar for all of us, that the groups are very black and white in their doctrinal thinking. Like, it's black and white, who's in the group and who's out, like what is light and what is dark. And there's usually at some point in the recruitment process, you're forced to accept some kind of like unusual consequential teaching about the Christian faith that's counter to everything you've learned before. So this fellow was telling me about his story of being recruited, and he'd gotten to that pill he had to swallow about like what he believed were Christians were not, and the real true Christians were here. And so there's this in group of saved people and everybody else is not. And he was having his mind was fighting against the logic that he was being forced to swallow. And I remember he said to me, that I was thinking in my head something my dad had said to me. Don't chain me up, bro. For him, that phrase had meaning about like, you're trying to chain my mind up. And he felt the chains kind of going around him. And then once they were wrapped around his mind and his ability to think about who was in and who was out in this sort of logical, airtight, scriptural prison he was in, he would have taken any kind of punishment because he didn't want to be on the out group, Yeah. And I was thinking about like during that recruitment process, I wonder, I had an experience like that. I wonder if anybody else had an experience like that, where like part of it was accepting some like doctrinal twist or biblical twist where you were like, I don't think that's I'm not sure if I could. And
Yeah.
like once you're in and you see it through the looking glass, you can't get out.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. That was the only way they can control you. You had to somehow submit to some sort of hierarchy and rules.
Right.
And the Bible was used as the weapon, which is the very thing, as I think all of us did. We love God. So you use that against yourself. And that is a very strong and powerful weapon.
Yeah. Yeah. They weaponize your doubt and turn the very thing within you that's thinking, that is you, your identity, your rationale, the thing God gave you. Jesus said, love God with all your strength, mind, soul, and mind. The very thing he gave you, they weaponize it, and they make your rational faculties suspect, and even haunts with demons. And they make you feel like you've got you've got to stop thinking like that. You've got to make the leap, like you said, Adam, make the leap out to embrace that which doesn't make any sense at all. But it's going to make sense because they said it will. So your experience then becomes hostage to how well you obey what they want you to do.
And all these other wonderful people around you, these people who seem to have their lives together, who seem to have the mission that you want, who have if you're sort of questioning it, you kind of look to your left and you look to your right, and like the people next to you are like, oh yeah, it's absolute truth. Absolutely. So like, you just kind of swallow it because you're like, well, I feel weird about it, but like everybody hears into it. So maybe my instincts are just not right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. there was like every few months or so they would have a new witch hunt of something that wasn't right that they thought was right before. And this particular thing seemed to be, when I was first in, there was and I'm going to speak a little bit about, the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And there was this free movement to operate in your gifts of tongues and charismatic movement. And then they started to shut it down. Those people that all have, spoken tongues, those people that were moving free in the Spirit, they sequestered us. I was one of them, and told us that was no longer of God, that they got a message that it was no longer of God. And they exorcism is not to no longer, be free. And we all know where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Shutting that down, and I swallowed it and I believed it, because I'm like, well, these people are closer to God than I am. So what I've been experiencing since I was a little kid in the Pentecostal movement has been wrong all this time.
Yeah. The same thing happened. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. They take what you know to be what you've established is faithful and true and has brought so much blessing to people. They have to stand. There has to be something suspect to it, and heaven forbid they find that you actually have an affinity with it. I'm sure. Imagine, Scott, if they understood you to be a preacher's kid, I'm sure they came and put you on the microscope quite a bit for that.
Oh yeah, and you had talked about when the love bombing it around, because I had a high income and I had a job outside of the community. And I know I introduced them as Gladstone Community earlier, but they had changed their name to Madison Place Church or Madison Place Community. So they've gone through that too. And I knows that anyone's watching this thinking, hey, I'll attend this nice church in Cincinnati called Madison Place. Don't do it. But yeah, the love bombing with me lasted a little longer because I had a lot to bring to the table financially. I wouldn't say that I got away with stuff. I just would say I had a lot more attention paid to me.
Yeah. I would say something too, financially. That would be something that I think people should take into consideration when they're being recruited is the finances. They will obviously not want you to look at that, and they will accuse you of loving the God of money, and not loving, they'll totally be all over that. But you follow that money trail and you're going to find a lot of answers a lot sooner. A lot of these cults are operated to fill the pockets of the leaders. It's not just an ego for some of these cult leaders. They are literally setting themselves up to retire. Very wealthy. So it's can't say it's, that's a cookie cutter answer for all the cults, but my gosh, that is the money trail. When you start looking at the money, you just start going, okay, you get a lot of answers a lot quicker.
Right. You do. Right.
I think one of the things that kept me continuing on for so many years, when I tell people would never expect that I would have been part of a controlling religious group. But when I tell people that, they're like, well, how did that happen? And when did it happen? And when you tell them 11 years, it's like, oh my gosh, how did it happen so long? Like, what happened? And for me, they got me involved really quickly in doing the stuff they were doing. So they let me in on the secrets of how the sausage is made. Yeah. So once you start saying, hey, when people come through the door, what you do is you go up to them, you say, hey, bro, do you lift? Wow, let me see your tats. So cool. Yeah, wow. And then just smile and nod at everything they say. And then you're like, oh, and you realize, like, I can do this manipulation too. But what you think is, I can welcome this person into this place so they can come and find Jesus. But they find us. I have regrets about a lot of that. But I think the reason I stayed so long is because I know that I helped build that. I did the stuff that was done to me. to lots of other people.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to, if it was at all possible, be able to rescue some of the people out of there.
Yeah, everyone wants to go in, and then when you get involved, like I said, you when you feel trapped, when the door closes and you realize well, you're in, then you want to try to make the best of it, and that's where each of you, like I said, and when I've met you guys, as we've shared, each of you knew that when that door closed, you wanted to go in there, you wanted to be the best. And then now in Adam's case, you never joined Remnant Fellowship, but you were their number one recruit. You were going to be the prize on top of the cake there. And you asked you were just so gauche as to actually ask questions. And unfortunately, as we all know, questions are the according to cult scriptures, asking questions is really the second unforgivable sin.
Pro tip: do not ask a cult leader if they're a cult leader. It will make them happy.
Yeah,
I think everybody that's ever been participated in a love bombing cult, if they have any influence at all, their desire is to fix it.
Yeah.
If these guys just understood the following things, then maybe things would change.
Yeah.
And I think that there's still a lot of equity rescuing going on there with some folks.
Yeah.
They just stick around because there's this hope that sometime they'll see the light.
Right.
I think that's a great point. I think a lot of people do, they see the hypocrisy, but you're already in the chains. You're already, I see hypocrisy here. I see some cheating here. I see some things that are not quite right, but this is still the one true church. I still have to toe the line. I still have to try to fix this. I have to be a good soldier. And you can't get out even when you see the hypocrisy, and you will go to bat for that church and lie for that church, to cover things up for other people, because you're trying to help, save Zion, or build the kingdom, or whatever it is.
Right.
It's what victims of abuse do. They cover for the abuse.
Yeah.
You're being verbally abused, or
that's a great point.
Spiritually abused. It's the same thing.
Yeah. How many of us know people who have been in abusive situations where clearly somebody was completely crazy and should have gotten and should have been gotten away from, but that person went back. No, I love him.
Mm-hmm.
I love him. I can't leave him. I got a baby by him. No, we're going to work this out, and they just keep going back in and get their face caved in again and again. Why? Because they've been persuaded that they are nobody without that person. Mm-hmm. It's very similar. It's a very human nature. It really works that way. It's very sad, very tragic.
I found that the recruitment that we had at mine was a small cult, but very highly intelligent people that were successful.
Oh yeah, right.
The publishing, self-publishing, entrepreneurial people. We had nurses. We had very highly intelligent people. So
right.
I think intelligence really is the right perspective for people to be asking about how you get drawn into a cult. I think anybody can be drawn into a cult.
Yeah.
Anybody. There's not really dumb or smart, really. In fact, I think if you're a really thinking person, that might be maybe somebody that might be a little bit more susceptible. People that look into things, or curious of things, or want to figure things out. Those might be actually the people that might be a little bit more susceptible.
Not just more vulnerable, but also more desirable to the cult. Because if you have gifts, if you have money, or if you have intelligence or talents, you are an asset to the group if they can get you in and get you firmly ensconced.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Most people don't understand, as Dr. Dr. Paul Martin once wrote in his book, Cult Proof Your Kids. Most people don't get that virtually anyone can get involved in the cult under the right circumstances. The president of the student body at Wheaton College later became one of Jim Jones' right-hand men in Guyana. I mean, it's a reality. It's part of the way life is, and it's just, it's got nothing to do with intelligence or anything like that. It's everything to do with just being a human being and being open and willing to trust. Everybody thinks, I like to think everybody believes that, being open and to others and listening to others is a good thing, right? And that's what you all did, and that's what people do. They listen, and it sounds good, and it seems good. Then there's a good chance they're going to go that way. So we're almost at an hour now on this, and I didn't want to hold you guys any longer. So I'd love to keep going if you want to, but I know I don't want to keep you longer. But in closing this, maybe you guys can say, maybe there's some things you can tell, or maybe some advice tidbits you can share with us. If someone was to come to me, well, how do I avoid getting into a cult? I mean, we know we've kind of discussed what they look like, what happens when you become part of a new family, all those things. But what would you say to people who ask you, well, how do I stay away from cults? How do I see them? How do I avoid them? What should I do? What can I do to avoid that?
That is a great question, Raphael. And I was literally hoping you would end on something like this. I have the one that I always tell my kids or tell other people. Any group that tells you that you cannot read information critical about the group, or you can't talk to former members, or they don't let their members talk to former members, it's a suspect group. It may not technically be a cult, but you don't want to be a part of it.
Yep. Right.
Here, Raphael.
I think another thing to be aware of is that high control groups have a tendency to have a methodology that is targeting you. You are a target. And when they find you, they're not looking just for you. They're looking for you and your children and their friends and everybody in your neighborhood and everyone on your Facebook and Insta list. They are looking to use you to fortify the organization. So if you notice that someone is very, very interested in you, but they're also very, very interested in all of your friends as well, that might be an issue. And at least too, like, I think making sure that you stay connected with your family of origin, such as they are, however they are. If you find a group that's trying to split you from your family, this is not a wine and wineskins thing. If you find someone trying to split you from your family, then consider that it might be a high control group.
You were saying, Scott, I'm sorry, I think we lost you there because of the jitter here.
Oh, no, I have a meeting in about 15 minutes. I got to be on, so I'm going to have to drop. But I would say the same thing. I was going to say what Julie said was about anyone that's trying to separate you from your family of origin. That might not be prevalent once you get until you're in. My mom was dying of cancer, and they didn't want me to go home.
Huh.
That broke the camel's back, but that was 3 years in. So that would be a big red flag. Anybody that does not want you to communicate with anyone that you knew before.
Right.
Yeah. But I do have to go. So.
All right, Scott.
I'll just add to his. I'm going to just
Scott.
Third that anybody trying to disconnect you from your family, in my circumstance, that came a little later. They didn't want to think that they would be like that. So they try to mask that one. But anybody that doesn't think that you can grow where you are, I think is suspect. Anybody that basically doesn't believe that God can meet anybody wherever they're at and grow them in the design and what God wants for them in their life, where they are just definitely suspect. So if you must drop teachings from other people, if you have to basically not be, I'm not saying that you are in charge of your own destiny, but you and everybody here on this earth has their own journey. So if somebody's trying to hijack that and make your journey their journey, then I think they're highly suspect.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And that's how it is, folks. Cultism is as American as Mom Apple Pie and Hyundai. I mean, it's just the way it is. It's a mundane part of our lives, and works into and infiltrates every fiber of our existence. It just boils down to where it doesn't even seem unreal. It may seem different, but everybody's open to different things. But the recruitment of cultism really does go into the directions that we've heard tonight. And I've heard so many people tell these same stories, but you guys have got incredible insight here that I really appreciate your sharing. Any final thoughts you'd like to perhaps say to anyone who might be asking any other questions? Any other final observations you'd like to share?
I'm willing for anybody to reach out if they need someone to talk to. So maybe on that note.
Yep.
There's only one of you, Raphael.
You got that right. You surely got that right. I'm only one person. I'm in no way, shape, or form claim to be any expert at this. I just a Pentecostal preacher who got involved in this stuff and started hacking away at it. But yeah, contact is important. I mean, if we can, we certainly have our own inbox, Raphael at spiritwatch.org or help@spiritwatch.org. If you folks out there listening have any sort of questions or comments, send them on to us. We can forward them on whoever on our esteemed panel here shared. We can certainly send them on. And I once again want to emphasize that it would be confidential and sent quietly. And we once again want to thank the four of you guys, got to leave, but thanks so much for coming out this evening and for sharing. It's been truly an enlightening time, and I look forward to perhaps doing this again in a different way somewhere. But again, cult recruitment certainly is a challenge, but it's not an unsurmountable one. By asking the right questions and keeping an open mind to alternative perspectives, which is something cult recruitment doesn't like you to do, those seem to be part of the answer. And you folks have done a wonderful job filling in a lot of cracks and providing us some really great insights. Thank you so much for coming out this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.